the November 27th, 2017 City of Marquette Commission meeting. Let's rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, you can take the roll, please.
Mic on.
It's on.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Frazier, Commissioner Plord,
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds,
Here.
Commissioner Stonehouse,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Campana,
Here.
Mayor Baldini.
Here. Commissioners, can I entertain a motion to excuse Commissioner Frazier? Commissioner Stonehouse?
So moved.
Seconded by Commissioner Reynolds.
Second.
He's
All
out of
those-
town.
He's
He's
on
out of town.
vacation?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Okay. You also have in front of you a copy of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Mayor Campana? No. No.
I move we accept the agenda as stated.
Okay. Is there support? Commissioner Reynolds?
Second.
Okay, second. The agenda as presented. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Okay, no, okay. I have some announcements. First, applications for the vacancy for the commission position vacated by our fellow colleague, Sarah Cambenzi, being elected to state representative. Those applications, just as a reminder, will be accepted until close of business on Thursday, the 30th. Just as a reminder. Secondly, a reminder of the winter snow fun holiday parade. That's the 42nd tree lighting and parade in the city. It'll start at 6 o'clock on Friday. Go up 3rd Street to the Commons area for a celebration. Santa will be there, light the Christmas tree. So we hope you can all make it. The weather is reported to be a nice day also. Also, we have a number of vacancies and boards and commissions. The list is on was on the screen. It's a significant number, but it's also a significant number of people who are participating. So look at it if you're interested. We'd like you to do that. The other thing that is going to cause some confusion here in the City Hall is remodeling is going to go on. And whenever remodeling goes on, that means there's disruption. And so the city clerk, you will now find in room 103. And I'm not going to even try to explain where all of the other offices are. I think we'll probably have mention it, thank you. And that'll probably until next summer because of the new public service. Some people have been moved out of this building. Some others have been moved downstairs. And so when you come here, you will, if you feel you're lost, you probably are, but we'll help you. Also, I have an announcement that Annunciata, where are you? She showed up at our meeting a month ago. It seems like just yesterday. And we didn't have a pin for her at that time, and I want to give you that pin right now, okay? Thank you for serving on our solid waste.
Thank you very
Okay?
much for sending.
No, thank you. Okay, let's deal with boards and commissions. Clerk, would you like to give us the background on the appointments?
Certainly. Mayor, background on appointments. Harold Hayes, Market Area Wastewater Treatment Advisory Board for a unexpired term ending 6/1/19. Tony Tollefson, Market County Transit Authority for an unexpired term ending 12/31/20. Evan Bonzal, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending January 29th, 19. Maureen Sullivan, Parks and Rec Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending January 29th, 18. Michael Larson, Planning Commission appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a term expiring February 15th, 2018.
Thank you. Commissioners, your pleasure. Commissioner Reynolds?
I move we appoint Harold Hayes to the Marquette Area Wastewater Treatment Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending June 1st, 2019. Tony Tolleson to the Marquette County Transit Authority for an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2020. Evan Bonzel to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for an unexpired term January 29th, 2019. Maureen Sullivan to Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending January 29th, 2018, and Michael Larson to the Planning Commission appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a term expiring February 15th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there support for that motion? Commissioner Plord?
I second that.
Thank you. Any discussion on these appointments?
I'm just glad we had this many people step up.
Pardon me?
I'm glad we've had this many people step up
Yeah,
to the boards.
okay. All right, thank you. All those in favor of appointing these 5 individuals, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Reappointment clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Wes Pernsteiner, Downtown Development Authority, for a term ending January 1st, 2021. James Johnson, Downtown Development Authority, for a term ending 1/1/21. Commissioner Pete Frazier, Marquette County Central Dispatch Policy Board, for a term ending 12/31/20.
Okay. Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Commissioner Plord?
I move that reappoint Wes Pernsteiner, Downtown Development Authority, for a term ending 1/1/21. James Johnson, Downtown Development Authority, for a term ending 1/1/21. And Commissioner Pete Frazier, Marquette County Central Dispatch Policy Board, for a term ending 12/31/20.
Thank you. Is there support for that?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Stonehouse seconded that. Any discussion or comment? Commissioner Stonehouse? No? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to reappoint the 3 individuals indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? 5-0. I want to then recognize some individuals who have given their time and have served, and they are outgoing members, and if they would join me at the podium over here to my right, I'd appreciate that. Christine Granger, Carol Fulsher. Oh, you're all together. Very good of you. You organized yourself. Joe Round and Sarah Perikowski. Let me thank you. This is a group of individuals. Let me explain and take a moment to explain it. They were on the Public Arts Task Force, and they've done their work. They've done a superb job. As you know, we're trying to do public art in the city. And they worked at this, came up with plans, ideas, how this is going to be structured. And so they are now going out of business, in effect. I suspect some of them will show up when we put together the permanent committee for the city. And we want to thank them because it's a new idea. And if you look around the city, I was educated in finding out that we never think of the Father Marquette statue as public art. Oh, it's always been there, okay? And we also have the bell tower downtown. That's public art. And so many people, if you've traveled, you've gone to communities and you've seen that public art, it really is quite attractive and it adds something to a community. And I suspect we will have some arguments and fights over what people decide to put up, but that's all right. But we want to thank them. They spent a great deal of time and effort evaluating, looking at what other communities did, and so we want to thank them. And we give you our thanks, and we're assuming some of you will apply for the permanent commission. We give you a certificate, and we give you a T-shirt. Maybe we should have you as a committee look at some new artwork on our T-shirt or something, okay? Christine Granger, Christine. And if the size doesn't work, call us and we'll.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your, Carol. Thank you. Let me give you that also,
All right.
okay? Thanks
Yep.
very much. And Victoria? No, you're Sarah.
Yes,
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Let me give you,
and I didn't do the public arts, but I did the Parks and Rec.
I'm sorry.
That's
you're
okay.
right, okay?
I can't
Yes.
claim all the cool art in the
Yeah.
city.
Well-
I can just claim that we have recreation.
I suspect they're going to be looking at our parks maybe
Yeah,
for
maybe.
some of that,
Maybe some
okay?
stuff.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is our parks are great advisory bodies to us, and we listen. Matter of fact, I read the minutes, and you're always discussing things, and I learn a lot as to why we should or shouldn't do something, or things of that nature. So let me give you this, Sarah, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for your
Yeah,
effort, okay?
thank you very much.
All right. And Joe, let me thank you, okay, for your work also. Okay, thank you. Do any of you want to make any comments? Hmm?
No.
No, that was quick. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your input. Okay. Let's move on here. We have a public hearing. Clerk, do you want to provide us with some background on that?
Certainly, Mayor, thank you. Background. Petitioners have requested that a portion of Meadow Street be vacated between lots 32 and 39 in the Homestead Addition. Meadow Street is a 60-foot wide right-of-way that was platted within the Homestead Addition in 1892. When the highway bypass was constructed the new road was laid over much of the area where Meadow Street was platted. There is now only about 140 feet in depth to Meadow Street at its longest point between Homestead Street and the US 41 M28 bypass. The city of Marquette has transferred ownership of a small portion of the Meadow Street right-of-way to the state of Michigan for the expansion of the US 41 M28 highway right-of-way, and the remainder of the Meadow Street right-of-way is what is proposed to be vacated. In accordance with the procedure developed by the Community Development Department for street vacations, the petition has been circulated to all city departments for review and comment. The petitioners own property that is adjacent to the subject right-of-way. If vacated, the city commission, adjoining property owners, may take legal action to have the right-of-way property included with their own property in accordance with the state's Land Division Act. On October 3rd, 2017, the Planning Commission held a public hearing regarding a petition to vacate a portion of Meadow Street, a street platted between the Whetstone Brook and Homestead Street, but never constructed, and made the following motion. It was moved by P. Schlegel, seconded by A. Andrus, and approved 7-0 to that after review of the background information for 05 STR 1017, the Planning Commission finds that the proposed street vacation would not conflict with any intended municipal rights of way, and hereby approves the street vacation with the following recommendation: that the engineering and public works comments regarding a utility easement are incorporated into the final approval by the City Commission. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation: conduct a public hearing and approve the request to vacate the indicated portion of Meadow Street and direct the city attorney to create a perpetual easement for access, maintenance, and replacement of the municipal utilities currently in this public right-of-way. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. At this time, the public has an opportunity to speak on this matter. I would ask that if you do want to speak, you provide your name, your address, the community you live in, township or city, and you keep your comments within 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter? Anyone wishing to comment on this, vacating this property? Seeing no one wanting to comment, I'm going to call this session to a close. And commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Your Honor, could I just make
Sure.
a suggestion? The recommendation is to approve the request to vacate the street. There's actually a resolution, so whoever
Yes,
made the
well, no, we have
motion
to-
could,
We don't have a motion yet.
but if there is a motion, it would be to approve the resolution.
Yes. Mhm.
It's just that one word change, and the rest is fine.
Okay, yeah. It's on it was in your back packet, page 36, if you're looking on your computers. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Canna?
I move that we approve the resolution to vacate the indicated portion of Meadow Street and direct the city attorney to create a perpetual easement for access, maintenance, and replacement of the municipal utilities currently in this public right-of-way.
Is there support for that? Commissioner Stonehouse?
I will support that motion.
Okay, thank you. Any comment?
This is just a very short piece of property. It was supposed to be a street. It never will be a street at this point. So the city's just offering it up to the adjacent home owners. But the city will always have an easement for utilities, I believe.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Stonehouse?
I have no comment.
Okay. Other commissioners? Okay. Hearing none, this is a roll call vote because it is a resolution. So, clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Plord?
yes.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Yes.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Campana?
Yes.
Mayor Baldini?
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Close this portion of the public hearing, and let's move on to presentations. We have two presentations this evening, one from Cliff Dow, not from Cliff Dow, but about the Cliff Dow property. And who's going to lead this off? Okay, please, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Richard Barron. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Foley, Barron, Metzger, and Yipe, and have been brought on as special counsel for the City of Marquette to address the Cliffs Dow site. This is our annual report. We had a work session earlier this afternoon where we talked about some of the issues in more detail. So this presentation will be more of the Reader's Digest version. That way the public is briefed as well. As I mentioned during our work session, this is really a good news presentation. We've been studying the site since the city was requested by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to address groundwater issues beginning in 2009. If you remember, some years earlier than that, a number of years earlier, the city had looked at groundwater there. Nothing had happened for a number of years. The DEQ then requested the city to do something. The city brought on Trimedia Environmental in engineering to look at this. We were hired on as special counsel, and for the last number of years we've been obtaining data at the site to address the soil and groundwater conditions that were there. The concern that the DEQ had to do with historic contamination that was residual from the operations of the Cliff Dow site migrating from the site into Lake Superior. And so what was done was the installation of an array of monitoring wells, both inland wells, as we've talked about, as well as the more critical well for our purposes tonight, which is what are called the groundwater surface water interface monitoring wells. And those are the monitoring wells, just to recap, that are closest to the lake, that are intended to represent the contaminants condition right before they leave the site, before they would migrate to Lake Superior. And one of the concerns that the state has is what, of course, is migrating into one of the Great Lakes. And the state has a lot of criteria that's out there as to when you need to just monitor, when you have to take action, when you need to do other things. And so we've been monitoring for a number of years. We have, over the intervening years since 2009, after we obtained sufficiently reliable data sets, we were able to narrow down the scope of the wells and to a certain extent narrow down some of the parameters that we were testing for. What we did at the end of last year, and you might recall when we did the annual presentation last year, we discussed how our intention was to request a mixing zone analysis by the state. That's where the state looks at the data for the contaminants that are migrating off-site and evaluates them against the published criteria, the default criteria, and also can develop site-specific criteria. So we have contaminants that are historically left in place from the operations of Cliff Dow that are migrating through the groundwater to Lake Superior. What the state has done is they've looked at a very robust set of data that we've obtained over the last number of years, and they've come up with site-specific criteria for various parameters. So when they did the chemical plant there, they were distilling wood and creating all different kinds of chemical products from wood. And there's a surprising number of chemicals that are contained in wood when you distill it. And then they were also doing other things to refine those out. So there's certain things that the state wants us to look at. And just as a couple of examples, there's benzene, there's ethylbenzene, there's xylenes, and those are all constituents in gasoline as well. They either came from the wood processing or from just industrial operations. Those compounds tend to be lighter. There's heavier compounds, some of the naphthalines and things like that tend to go lower down in the water column. And so the state has developed site-specific criteria for the city to meet in terms of allowing a discharge. What that means is we have a couple of step process that we have to implement. And we met with the DEQ earlier this month after we got the site-specific criteria to talk about what they were looking for and to make sure that we were on the same page. What we will do is we will come up with a monitoring plan and we will submit that to the state for approval. That monitoring plan will be different than the plan that we've been following over the last number of years. Because now that we have mixing zone criteria, we are going to limit the wells. We're going to further shrink down the wells that we're going to monitor. We're also going to narrow down the parameters that we're going to be monitoring for. So if you run, as an example, a standard volatile organic compound or VOC scan, you get a big laundry list of things that are either found or not found, but they're analyzed for. Well, the state has focused us in on a smaller subset of contaminants, so we're going to refine our test parameters so we only analyze for the things that the state is concerned about. We're going to modify some test methods per the state's suggestion, and then come up with a plan on a going forward basis to monitor over the next 5 years. When we submit our plan, we will be asking the state to approve no further action for the Cliffs Dow site other than the monitoring plan. So now what that means is no further action doesn't mean that there's no other possible environmental issue at the site. What it will mean in this circumstance is that where the state said you need to check out the groundwater and do some further evaluation, we have done that, we have the data, we now have the parameters, and the state hopefully will agree with us that if we do what we say that we are going to do in the monitoring plan, and if we don't exceed any of the criteria that the state has published for the chemicals of concern, that we don't have to do anything else at the site. So that doesn't mean that there's no other issues at all with the site, but it only means that from what the state asked us to look at, we've looked at, we've studied, and we won't need to be doing anything further other than living up to the monitoring plan. Now, if in fact we have an exceedance, something that's higher than for one of the chemicals, higher than the level that the state says is protective of human health and the environment, then we'll retest and see whether it's just a data anomaly, whether there's just an issue with the lab that time, did something happen with the sample, and then if in fact it came back that we still had some exceedances, we would have to evaluate whether there's some type of action that we might need to take to address that particular constituent of concern. But failing that, once we get the no further action request submitted and approved by the state, we would then monitor and report to the state annually or semi-annually, depending on what's agreed, for the next 5 years, at least at a minimum, so that we have a good indication that we are continually and consistently meeting the criteria that the state has laid out. I'll just talk for a moment about what the mixing zone criteria mean. If you have an industrial discharge and you're discharging from a factory to a pipe, or even the wastewater treatment plant discharges out to Lake Superior after they've treated the waste, the water that's coming out of the pipe doesn't typically need to be drinkable because the state takes into account further attenuation, further reaction in the environment, and frankly dilution as well. If you have a drop that's going out the end of a pipe in comparison with a bazillion gallons of water someplace else, as long as you're not going to cause any net degradation to that other water supply, and depending on the parameter, then the state will approve that. So with the mixing zone request that we're making and that we have made, and once we get our plan approved, then we will have what's changed from a non-permitted discharge, meaning it's just happening. We have to monitor it, but we don't have a permit that allows us to do it, to actually having the state say that discharge that you have coming from the property over time is fine and won't be degrading human health or the environment. So it will change from a non-permitted discharge to a permitted or allowable discharge. And that's what we've been working towards for the last number of years. And now that we have site-specific criteria, these particular chemicals at this particular location, based on the mass of chemicals, when they look at the whole sheet of water that's moving out towards the lake, all of that volume at the varying levels, states determine that that's protective of human health and the environment and will be allowed to go forward with that plan. So to sum it up, we did monitoring today because we've been doing monitoring every November, December for the last number of years. In January, we will be submitting a request to the state to approve a monitoring plan. We likely will meet with them to discuss that, iron out any details. And then following that approval, we will go forward with that monitoring plan, cutting down on the number of wells, cutting down on the number of parameters, and doing that monitoring as agreed on in the plan. And that's it in a nutshell. Any questions from the commission?
Commissioners, any questions? We asked them. The no further action, let's say everything proceeds as you laid out. what is this, a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Mr. Mayor, it would be a minimum of 5 years for monitoring that we would be submitting to the state, because the state needs to see that we have consistent, repeatable data that's reliable. So, and then of course, if there's a change in the construction of the wells, or if a well had to be relocated for construction or something like that, we would have to evaluate that. But it would typically be 5 years, and that's what we've talked to the state about submitting. And then after that, I guess to anticipate a follow-up question then, after that, depending on what the data looked like, would depend on whether we needed to do something else, perhaps monitoring further. And I can give a quick example. We have criteria, and here's my arbitrary criteria level right there. If in fact we're way down here consistently, then everything's good. If we are right around here, right around here, right around here, meaning very close to the criteria, as we're getting closer to the 5 years, the state may want us to continue to look at that if they don't feel like there's enough buffer there.
This is a piece of property, obviously, we have a great deal of interest in. We've had it for years, but it's also very close to the road that we want to move by the lake. And would what you're doing in any way impede us from, if we had the money, or if we get the money, to move the road and reconstruct?
No, our plan on going forward is to monitor the wells. As long as those wells are not impacted by the construction, it shouldn't make any difference. Now, I will say this, anytime you do anything on the site or in the near vicinity of the site, because we have historic groundwater that picks up residual contaminants from an upland area and moves that towards the lake, we know there's rubble on the site, there's old foundations, there's barriers that will change the way the water moves throughout the site. So anytime you physically change something between the upland area and the monitoring area, you do have the potential to impact your freight and transport. What I mean by that is how fast things are moving, the direction they're going, things along that line. So relocating the road isn't prohibited by what we're doing here, but it may cause some numbers to change on the monitoring wells. We'd just have to evaluate that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Richard, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Barron,
Thanks,
thank you
Mayor.
for coming and being here in our winter, early winter.
Love being here.
Thank you. Okay. Our second public hearing this evening is a Presque Isle Park Advisory Committee. And I think Sam Crowley chairing that, or you're going to present it this evening. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Sam Crowley. I am the chair of the Presque Isle Park Advisory Committee, and we are doing our annual presentation to the committee, or to the commission. Thank you for your time. I know it's a busy schedule, and thank you for the support that we've received over the years, and I know the committee is looking forward to hearing comments on the presentation. We currently have one opening on the committee, but that just came open within the last month and a half. We're also a committee that our meetings, we've only had one meeting without a quorum that we were unable to hold over the last year. Purposes and goals. So our job essentially is to advise you, the City Commission, on Presque Isle and make recommendations for your consideration. So the past year we've been pretty busy. We've worked on a lot of different topics. To go through some of the more significant ones, starting near the bottom. Number 8, the Dr. John B. Anderton Memorial Trail System. So this was something that was approved by both Parks and Rec Committee as well as PIPAC, and then sent to the commission, which approved it. A funder stepped up and funded the sign, and over the past couple years, we have researched the sign, designed the format for it, and then this past late summer, we were able to install that and have a ceremony at Presque Isle for that. Number 7, talking about dark sky. I'll talk more about that later in the presentation, but that was something that we worked on over the past year. Number 6, so students from a science class at Marquette Senior High School developed some interpretive signage and came to our committee and asked to install it at Presque Isle. You can see it. It's near the parking area by the break wall. And so it's a pretty neat thing for the students to step forward and do something like that. Let's see. Number 5. So one of the things that's happened at Presque Isle over the past couple summers has been increased usage. And in turn, there's also been some increased abuse. There are people camping sometimes at night. They are sometimes having campfires. The other issue has been hammocks. And so people have been stringing hammocks between the trees. This is all in violation of ordinances at the park and damages the park, which is why there's ordinances to prevent that type of behavior in the first place. Students from a outdoor recreation and leadership program stepped forward and came to the committee and asked if they could do a Leave No Trace presentation. Leave No Trace is a national organization, and they set standards for how to behave, how to act in the woods, and how to preserve what is there. And so they did a Leave No Trace presentation at the island that was open to the public. And that's something that we're excited about and looking forward to having that happen again in the future. And that is how we're looking to address this, is through public education, and then start stepping more towards the enforcement, so that as people who are using the park but not knowingly violating the ordinances can be educated and then hopefully stop that behavior. Let's see, so number 3, the erosion by black rocks. So this is something that last year at this time presented to the commission as well, and that is a high priority for the committee. Unfortunately, due to various reasons, it was unable to be addressed this summer. So none of the physical work that we're looking to have happen this season. We are looking forward to that happening in early spring next year to address that. And then number 1, the guidelines for a kayak concessionaire agreement. So a kayak outfitter, this is a business, a local business that rents kayaks, or I shouldn't say rents kayaks, but you can pay for a kayak trip where there's a guide provided, equipment, safety equipment, etc., and then take a tour out on the water at Presque Isle. They approached both the Park and Rec Committee and approached PIPAC about having an agreement with the city to be able to do that officially. Between Parks and Rec and ourselves, we developed safety that is set to a national standard. So equipment that's used, the training for the guides, the equipment carried is all set to a national standard. And then the other concern, especially for us at Presque Isle, is that this usage of the park does not impact the public or inconvenience the public in a significant way. And so how they operate has been specified in this agreement so that the public can still use the beach, can still find parking spaces available. And one of the things, and this is the very first time that we've had this agreement, and this is something that is being developed to avoid the problems that have been happening at Pictured Rocks that you might have heard about, where there is an outfitter that is operating, putting hundreds of people on the water every day, substandard safety measures are being taken, and then there's high impact in the park. Beaches are filled up with kayaks and people getting ready to launch or land, and then there is parking lots full of people who are customers of the outfitter. And so we're looking to be proactive on that issue. So goals for the upcoming year. So a big one that we're currently working on is land use policies for the park. One of the things that's been happening is with the increased use, I have felt personally that we've been in more of a reactive state, and then this past season we were able to move to more a proactive state, and we're hoping to continue that through the use of policies looking forward. How's the park being used? Who's using it? And how can we be able to continue keeping the park, preserve the park for future generations? You can also see the Black Rocks is a continued high priority for us as well. Opportunities, so the Lake Superior is at a near record high level for water. And obviously within the last month we've had some significant storms roll through, and one of the things it has done is eroded the shoreline. And this erosion is on the area along that western shoreline. There is active erosion taking place. And there is assessment of that erosion, and it's being measured from year to year to be able to assess that. So as that erosion continues, we have an idea and a record of what's happening and how that's been progressing. So to address dark sky, so in August of 2016, a group, the Marquette Astronomical Society, approached the committee or presented to the committee on having Presque Isle become a dark sky park. Dark sky is a national standard. There is just one dark sky park in the state of Michigan, and that's downstate. And the idea behind a dark sky park is that you take light measurement. And so this is light that's produced by street lights, et cetera, and you measure that. And when it falls below a certain threshold, the area becomes eligible to become a dark sky park. They approached the committee. The committee was excited about this. The committee turned it over to the city administration to address what the various departments would weigh in, so that we can get the opinion of the various departments. Unfortunately, the departments were not they were concerned about the park being open late, and then the impact that may have on behavior at the park with vandalism, graffiti, people getting hurt, things like that. And so the committee very much respects the opinion of the city departments, and so we asked if the two groups, if the dark sky and the city could get together, develop a compromise. We tried that for about 10 months. There wasn't the ability to reach a compromise. And so the committee tabled that. And then I believe the dark sky folks came in and presented to the city commission. And from that presentation, I believe an agreement was worked out. And for a trial period from August through November 1st, and just Friday and Saturday evenings, and have the park hours extended by 1 a.m. And so all the parties involved, the city, the dark sky folks, everyone compromised and give this a trial period. This was approved by Parks and Rec, by PIPAC, as well as the city commission. So the results from that trial, you can see the police department, community services, there are no significant issues to report. We do, DPW, there was some reports there. We do take that seriously. We're hoping to find out more about that, what exactly happened, and if that was tied to dark sky or not. It wasn't clear from the information we received. The committee was unanimously behind the trial, thought it was successful, and we appreciate everybody working together, and we hope that that can extend into the future. And then the folks behind dark sky as well felt it was good. And then there was just a minor issue as far as at night when cars were driving around because the road was still open, that the headlights were impacting the dark sky, the darkness there. And so with that, that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, I would
Thank
more
you.
than welcome that.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Stonehouse?
Well, Sam, I just wanted to thank you and all of PIPAC for the great work that you do. It really does, it is, forgive me, I've got a cold, but it is very well thought of. What you guys are doing is, in some ways, I think, cutting edge for how we manage urban parks. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Campana.
Sam, again, yes, thank you for being here tonight. You mentioned that Black Rocks, you're going to take measures next spring to address the erosion there. Briefly, quickly, can you just say what measures will those be? Are you going to block off that part going right up where the
Yes,
quick
so the
entrance?
concern for the erosion is the slope that is from the parking lot that has been traditionally how people access Black Rock. So you go up a slope, and that slope is eroding significantly, and it's increased over the past couple seasons. So what was initially placed was a fence, kind of a bit of a barrier. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to put some natural debris there, so some tree fall, some brush that's been collected from around the park, so it's natural as part of the park, and use that as a natural barrier, and then direct people with signage to go around towards the western side and then approach Black Rocks from that side. So then thereby starting a new habit, so to speak, in an area that is more erosion resistant.
Any other questions? Okay. Sam, please thank your committee members. It's with the recent storm, some of the planning you have done, and that's why this committee was established in '93, because of the erosion. And one storm, and you are back to, stage one again. But the good news, bad news is, the good news is more and more people want to go to Black Rock, or go to the island and go to Black Rocks and walk and things of that nature. And that obviously, as you have interpreted, and rightfully so, it has just brought other problems with it. I mean, Black Rocks has almost become a rite of passage in Marquette. And a lot of people, as they pass on and move away, will always talk about Black Rocks and jumping off or something, but we all know what that contributes, so as problems for your organization. But thank you very much, and please thank your committee for what you do. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, commissioners, for hearing my presentation.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, this is the time and meeting for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak or make some comments to the commission can do so at this point. You can also ask to speak on another item on the agenda. Please provide us with your name, your address, and your city or township that you reside on, and keep your comments to within 3 minutes. The lights up here will advise you of your time limitation. Anyone wishing to speak at this moment, at this time?
Frank Jeff Barredo, 350 East Ridge, Marquette, to speak on items 10 and 11. These are my opinions. October 10th, I said, I'm as ADA conscious as anyone. That is, other than wheelchair users and ramp builders. 3 minutes wasn't enough time to clarify. However, I did spend 3 years on the sale board, 2 as an officer, and a local friend uses a chair, as does my mom. Exceptions to providing full accessibility occur when an historic structure or natural area would be compromised. This is a current situation at Father Marquette Park, where we'll need to evaluate the results to discern whether yet another group became so immersed in their project they lost sight of the bigger picture, despite many prior warnings. Satisfying our disability community is crucial, yet on October 10th, a chair user mentioned how far we have yet to go. Twice in 2 meetings we heard of walkability issues. To better handle these concerns, at least one person with a disability ought to serve on this board at all times, and 3 or 4 women, not this good old boy majority. For the open seat, this board is wise to accept applications rather than hurriedly select the fourth highest vote getter under the tremendous pressure that prevailed. Mr. Fraser correctly stated that those who did not throw their hat in the ring before may wish to now, one reason being the regular ballots fill 3-year terms while the term in question spans only 1 year. One commenter feared this board may be looking for a good old boy. My concern exactly. Based on my 20 years here, this concern is extremely valid, although with enough public pressure, this unhealthy eventuality may be averted. And yes, this board has historically been composed of a good old boy majority. November 13th, Mr. Pelord neglected to respond to his totally inappropriate comment of October 30th when he said, Mr. Verito, if I used your so-called logic, I would conclude that you're threatening me and the commission. However, I am well experienced in the art of threatening, and looking at you and hearing you talk, I cannot possibly conclude that you could threaten us in any particular way, end quote. Questions remain as to how he misinterpreted a clearly stated comment as a threat and what he meant by saying, looking at you and hearing you talk, I cannot possibly conclude that you could threaten us. Such brainless junior varsity locker room talk gets us nowhere. Did Mr. Pelord refer to my stature as it appears he was? Has he any explanation? An absence of his usual personal attack in his closing November 13th comment further raised red flags, an indication he was checkmated but good. Also raising red flags was Mr. Campana not curbing a member who was clearly out of line. He just rode along as if that's a legitimate way for an official to behave. Such purposeful ignorance only lent credence to the many persons who independently believe the core of this board consists of good old boys. May the current chair please keep our rogue members in line to maintain some degree of professionalism.
Anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Anyone else?
Commissioners, my name is Tom Veer. I'm owner of 130 West Main Street. I'd like to reserve some time to talk on item number 12, the purchase request for city-owned property parcel 0151053 and a portion of 0151030.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak for reserved time? Anyone else? Not hearing anyone come forward, we'll close this session of public comment and move on with our agenda. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Colleagues, you have received a copy of the consent agenda before you. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Commissioner Campana?
I move we accept the consent agenda as stated.
So support for that? Commissioner Stonehouse?
You have a second?
Thank you. Any comments?
None?
Okay. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Next, we go to unfinished business. The first item, Clerk, would you like to provide background?
Thank you, Mayor. YMC lease assumption and agreement background. The City of Marquette entered into a lease agreement with the YMCA of Marquette County on September 8, 1998, amended by an addendum dated September 29, 2008, an addendum dated August 13, 2013, and an addendum dated March 11, 2014. The lease expires on December 31, 2052. The YMCA filed for bankruptcy protection on May 5, 2017, under which the bankruptcy code requires unexpired leases to be confirmed within 120 days of the filing date, September 2, 2017. Because the 120 days has expired, the YMCA seeks the City Commission approval for the attached lease assumption and agreement, as well as the attached restated lease, in order to retain the terms and conditions of the lease agreement as previously amended with the City of Marquette and provide confirmation to the court as required for their bankruptcy filing. The city charter states that no lease of property shall be authorized at the meeting at which it is introduced. These documents were introduced at the October 30th, 2017 meeting and are now recommended for approval. Fiscal effect, there is no change in the fiscal effect from previous agreements. Recommendation, approve the lease assumption and agreement as well as the restated lease between the city and the YMCA of Marquette County, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign both documents. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners, your pleasure. Commissioner Reynolds?
I move that we approve the lease assumption and agreement as well as the restated lease between the city and the YMCA of Marquette County and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign both documents.
Thank you. Support? Commissioner Plord?
I support.
Okay, comments?
The only comment is it's stated in the agenda that this is for them to continue on with their bankruptcy proceedings, so this is just paperwork.
Commissioner Plord? Okay. Any comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed? No? Unanimous. Thank you. Clerk, our next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Hockey Mutineers of Marquette lease agreement. Background. Hockey Mutineers of Marquette has requested that the City Commission consider leasing locker room space at Lakeview Arena. Staff has worked with the City Attorney and Hockey Mutineers of Marquette to draft a standard lease agreement which provides for the terms and conditions of the request. The monthly payment is $1,078, the first installment of which is due upon execution of this agreement. The term is 5 months from November 10th, 2017 to April 10th, 2018. This item was reviewed at the Commission's October 30th meeting and moved to tonight's agenda for approval. Fiscal effect, the Lakeview Arena Fund will receive $5,390 for fiscal year 17-18. Recommendation, approve the lease agreement with the Hockey Mutineers of Marquette for locker room space at Lakeview Arena and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign it. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners? Mr. Plord?
I move we approve the lease agreement with the Hockey Mutineers of Marquette for locker room space at Lakeview Arena and authorize the mayor and the city clerk to sign it.
Second? Support?
Second.
Commissioner Stonehouse seconded. Okay, any comments?
Just to say, the city's had a pretty good experience with the Mutineers, and they're looking forward to continuing with that experience. So I think we should do it.
No comment.
Okay, any other commissioners? Okay, no comment. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Yeses have it. Thank you. 5-0. Okay. Clerk, lease with the Superior Watershed Partnership.
Thank you, sir. Background, the Superior Watershed Partnership has requested the City Commission consider a lease agreement for office space at Lakeview Arena. Staff has worked with the City Attorney and SWP to draft a standard lease agreement which provides for the terms and conditions of the request. The monthly lease payment shall be $1,020. The term of the lease is 1 year. This item was reviewed at the Commission's October 30th meeting and moved to tonight's agenda for approval. Fiscal effect, the Lakeview Arena Fund will receive $12,240 in revenue for fiscal year 2018. Recommendation, approve the lease agreement with Superior Watershed Partnership for use of the office space at Lakeview Arena for a period of 1 year and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners? And what's your pleasure? Commissioner Campana?
I move that we approve the lease agreement with Superior Watershed Partnership for use of the office space at Lakeview Arena for a period of 1 year and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the agreement.
Is there support? Commissioner Reynolds?
Second.
Second. Okay, any comment?
This is a good situation for the city. The partnership is going to be filling up an empty space, and the city will receive money for it.
Nothing? Commissioners? Not hearing any other comments. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Yes is 5-0. Okay. Let's move on to new business. Clerk, provide the background.
Thank you, Mayor. Audio equipment upgrade for chambers. Background. Microphones in the commission chambers have not been upgraded since they were installed in 2001 and are overdue for replacement. In addition, audio in the room and on-record video is adversely affected when microphones are not turned on or when the speaker is outside the range of the microphone when speaking. New microphones and audio mixers are required for improved sound quality and for remote access by staff to control microphone power and volume settings. Of the 3 quotes obtained, staff recommends AVI Systems of Farmington Hills, Michigan which provided the second lowest quote of $23,881.67. The company is already familiar with the city's audio-video configuration, and the proposed solution is consistent with industry standards that will support the city's audio requirements for the foreseeable future. Fiscal effect: savings were realized in the fiscal year 2017 information technology budget by developing software applications internally rather than purchasing. The resulting savings can be carried over to the fiscal year 2018 Public Education Government PEG Fund to finance the purchase. Recommendation: authorize the city manager or his designee to approve the purchase of audio equipment for commission chambers in an amount not to exceed $23,900 and approve the carryover from the fiscal year 2017 budget to the fiscal year 2018 budget in the amount of $23,900. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Verito, you asked to speak on this item.
Frank Giffardo, 350 East Ridge, Marquette. These are my opinions. For years, since 2001, when this audio system was installed, we've had our public record marred with reports of members forgetting to activate their microphones and the audio system working poorly regardless. The technology undeniably existed in 2001 to have provided us with adequate audio, begging the question as to why the company that sold us this pitiful system wasn't held accountable within what ought to have been a reasonable warranty period. The supplement indicates that the recommended company, quote, is familiar with the city's audio-video configuration, and the proposed solution is consistent with industry standards that will support the city's audio requirements for this foreseeable future, end quote. The supplement doesn't indicate if this is the same company that installed the current system in 2001. If so, please ask for a discount off the $23,900 to offset our previous waste of money. Should we not expect a discount, having had the quality of our public record compromised for 16 years? A better question is how this situation persisted for so long, which is a sure indicator that our previous boards cared less about the integrity of our public record.
Thank you. Commissioners, what's your pleasure on this matter? Commissioner Stonehouse?
I motion to authorize the city manager or his designee to approve the purchase of audio equipment for commission chambers in an amount not to exceed $23,900 and approve the carryover from FY 2017 budget to the FY 2018 budget in the amount of $23,900.
Is there support for this motion? Commissioner Reynolds?
Second.
Okay. Comments?
We need it, and it's about time we get it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Reynolds?
I echo those thoughts.
Okay. Commissioners? Mr. Manager, you want to comment on this? Okay. All right, fine. There will be some new features. We've been discussing this. Mics will be turned on automatically. Some other audio conditions will be applied. All right, all those in favor of this motion indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Passes 5-0. Okay. Clerk, on the next item, City Commission Rules and Procedures.
Thank you, Mayor Background. Each of the year, the commission adopts rules and procedures to help the commission run an efficient meeting and to deal with the public and the media in a positive manner. The attached version replaces the rules in outline format with suggested changes in yellow. Fiscal effect: none. Recommendation: discuss the City Commission Rules of Procedure number 2003-01 as amended and approve the rules along with any changes the commission should determine. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Verito?
Frank Giffardo, 350 East Ridge, Marquette. These are my opinions. Only 2 items are marked in yellow, denoting proposed changes, but for reasons that aren't specified. They are B, agenda preparation. Item E, public comment may not exceed 3 minutes per person. A person may reserve time to speak on agenda items. This may result in the item being moved up on the agenda at the mayor's discretion. Note that at one time we could speak at reasonable length on agenda items. We were not limited to 3 minutes. Also, reasons as to why previous mayors neglected to move items up at their discretion has never been addressed. What are the conditions of discretion? Agenda preparation, item G reads, public hearings on ordinances, resolutions, or other matters require a public hearing, end quote. Oddly, this very clause is crossed out under item E above, and the quote just read from item E is crossed out under item G, which makes no sense. Again, no explanation is provided. Not even I believe that none of 7 members noticed what I'm probably misconstruing as 2 misprints. So please explain. Any yellow marking of a public comment opportunity is of concern to us because 2 years ago at the organizational meeting, several members proposed getting rid of our closing comment opportunity, which used to span 5 minutes. They'd allegedly discussed this proposal in small groups ahead of the meeting to make sure they had the votes. Although the closing comment item is not highlighted, it's feared that certain members may propose eliminating the closing opportunity once our chance to comment has ended. In 2015, they blamed one person who often criticizes this board rather than address his valid concerns. The record reveals that this person always spoke decorously. Citizens, as well as the 2016 board, overwhelmingly supported our closing comment opportunity to offer us a chance to add to the discourse while the topics are still freshly on our minds. Other people may not be able to make it here for opening comment, especially since the meetings now start an hour earlier. The many citizens who offered closing comments on November 13th further exemplified the need. In all my years in this chamber, I've never heard a public comment that was out of line, although I was told of one in my absence. A few comments pertain to matters outside this board's jurisdiction, but what's the harm? The time consumed by public comment is rarely a factor. Therefore, the few rules changes that occur ought to pertain to clarifications in how you people govern yourselves, a case in point being Mr. Pelord's responses to my comments. Please assure us of your own professionalism before attempting to control or restrict anyone else's. The only reason they ever restricted public comment was out of sheer cowardice.
Thank you. Commissioners, what is your pleasure with the rules and procedures in front of you? Anything with it, or? I think we have to adopt them.
Do you want to talk about
Or you just want to adopt them, talk about them? What would you like to do?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move that we discuss the City Commission Rules of Procedure 2003-01 as amended and approve the rules along with any changes the Commission should determine.
Thank you. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, thank you. Comments?
Well, I don't know if we were going to discuss this or not. There are some potential changes here. We could be moving public comment before the presentations, before public hearings. I do agree that public hearings should come after presentations. I don't believe that that should be first on the agenda because people don't want to sit through that, and that's more of a business item. So I'd like to see public hearing be moved to later in the agenda. As far as moving public comment early, I don't know if we necessarily like that because we have at our last public comment last meeting, there was numerous people speaking, and that takes up a lot of time. So I guess the question is, are we going to move this around at all, or are we going to keep it as it is? The only thing I would be in favor of is moving public hearing to later on the agenda. Other thoughts?
Other comments?
I have no strong feeling on it one way or another. Operationally, it can be a little inconvenient almost in either way depending on the situation. And by the time the evening's done, we do have so much work we have to get through. In whatever order we put it, it's still the same amount of work. I think anything that retains the flexibility of the commission to change that as the situation may dictate. In other words, there certainly can be a situation where the mayor would suggest, I think I'm going to take the public hearings and move them to the back end of the agenda because tonight we have other items to discuss that more people in the public might be interested in. So we can manage it in that fashion, and I think it would work out well.
We normally haven't done that, but we are able to do that where the mayor can rearrange the schedule as he wants. And as long as we can do that, I'm fine with the way it is.
Commissioner Plord?
I think Commissioner Stonehouse pretty much summed it up pretty well, and Mayor Pro Tem Campana as well. The important point being that we've got so much business to conduct in a particular meeting. The order that we do it in, I think, doesn't matter that much. And in these rules, perhaps some people have not read all the way through, but in these rules, the second public comment stays, which was reinstated 2 years ago. Nobody has any question about that at all. And I agree. I think it should stay. So as it is with the changes, I'm happy with it.
I don't have a strong feeling either way as well. I think the changes are fine.
Okay. Mr. Stonehouse?
Let me just point out for the general public, for our citizens, that we can change the rules at any time. In other words, whatever we choose to do tonight, whatever we accept to do tonight, can be changed next meeting if we have the need to do so. So we're not really pouring concrete around it. This is not a once-a-year thing. The rules can be changed as they need to be changed, as we would see fit, at any meeting, at any time. So it's good we do it, we have a plan, but we still have that flexibility within the plan to make it work the best possible way.
Good comment. These are not locked in for the year, and I think some of the discussion was around the idea of, if we knew we're going to have a public hearing, do we want to keep everybody sitting here waiting for something else to happen when they may not be interested in other parts of the thing? But it does, we have not utilized the provision of moving the items around, and that's a good comment. Maybe we should do that in the future, so, yeah, okay. Any other comments? Not hearing any. All those in favor of accepting the rules and procedures as presented, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no. Passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. The next item is item 12. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. Purchase request for city-owned property, parcel 0151053, and a portion of 0151030. Background. Viridio Group has presented the city manager with a letter of intent to purchase approximately a half acre of city-owned property located at the corner of 3rd and Main Streets. The property is currently used for surface parking, and the letter of intent expresses the developer's desire to work with the city to establish underground public parking as part of a dynamic plan for development, which is anticipated to be in the vicinity of $10 million worth of private investment. As well, the community development staff has identified several city and DDA adopted documents, attached community master plan, Market Smart Growth EPA report, DDA TIF plan, number 3, and the downtown Marquette parking utilization study that support infill development of the downtown and address any questions that may arise regarding surface parking. As with any property in the city of Marquette, any development of these parcels would be subject to local zoning. These properties are currently zoned as central business district, which would provide this development similar in size scale as the surrounding built environment under the approved process prescribing in the zoning ordinance. Per the provided resolution and city ordinance, the city manager is recommending the property sale be contingent upon an appraisal and local development agreement that outlines the investment and responsibilities for each party to the agreement. Fiscal effect to be determined based upon appraisal of the land and any subsequent local development agreement. Recommendation, adopt the resolution of intent to sell, which will provide direction for the city manager to begin negotiating a sale of the property subject to conditions listed, and bring back the sale to the City Commission for final approval. Alternatives as determined by the Commission.
Fine, thank you. Mr. Veer, well, before that, there is a resolution in the packet. We would have to adopt a resolution, and it's a roll call vote. So, Mr. Veer, you asked to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name, once again, is Tom Veer, and I own the property at 130 West Main Street, which is directly across Main Street from the subject property. From what I understand, and I was made aware of this when I saw the agenda meeting minutes, that Bob Mahaney and Viridia, and Bob is an excellent developer. He's done a lot of great things in town. What I see him do is a great thing, and this is no slam on Bob whatsoever. So what I see is an exclusive right to negotiate the purchase of this property. What I would like the commission to do, and I believe I've talked to most of the commissioners and the city manager about potential development that my partners and I are putting together, and we are presently under contract with IDI, the architectural and engineering consulting firm, to have a presentation to the commission in a short period of time. And Bob does state that he would like this in order to spend money on doing these things, and I completely understand that. I've developed, and I think I've done some projects around that particular area. And I agree, it does cost money and time, and that's what I have been spending my time and money doing, is putting together this proposal, and I'm asking the commission to be patient and to consider at least not exclusive rights and/or waiting on a proposal that would be present within 60 days. And this proposal does include that same parcel. Once again, I think Bob would do a great job. I think I can do a great job also. I think it's important for this city to be patient. This is infill. This is a big project. I have a big project to propose also. I think patience in something like this is a virtue. I think I've been patient in developing the properties around that area. I think I've done a great job. Once again, I think Bob will too. But I would like the opportunity to present something to the commission that would include that parcel. And I think it's important that the commission understand that and know that I've talked with you all, almost all individually, about this particular project, and have been spending time and money putting this together. So I would like the commission to at least have patience with this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, there's a resolution in your packet, as I mentioned. Is there anyone, or does the city manager want to make comments first, or do you want a resolution first? I think maybe we need a resolution. Or do you want to speak? Go ahead.
Just as a little background, and I was approached by Viridia Group some time ago with the desire to potentially purchase and develop this piece of property. And during that time, Bob Mahaney and Viridia have put together this a proposal, and we're presenting it here tonight, or they are. I've also talked to Mr. Veer, and I was aware that he was interested in purchasing property from the city, but until today, not this piece of property. And I apologize, it was my understanding that there was a different lot that he was interested in. And I had not engaged in any further discussions with him regarding this property. So I think both investors have a legitimate, or at least a good history in following through on these things. But I guess I would want to say that if I thought Mr. Veer wanted this property as well, I probably wouldn't have just asked for exclusive, or forwarded the exclusive rights to you to make the decision tonight. So, and just to thank you, Ron. But the resolution, if you read it, it doesn't really adopt the exclusive role that is being suggested, but this particular action will ask me to negotiate specifically with Viridia. Thank you.
Go ahead. Could I just add to what the city manager said? Mr. Mahaney came to the city with this letter of November 6th. We're not that's not the recommendation tonight to enter into this agreement. Actually, the letter's in the form of an agreement. We're not asking this agreement be entered into. This is the first step. The city has decided that they're interested in selling this parcel, and the first step is to direct the sale. And since Mr. Mahaney has expressed an interest, giving the city manager authority to negotiate with him, but it's not an exclusive. If the city had signed this letter and agreed to those terms, that'd be a different story, but that's not what's here before us tonight. It's simply to direct the sale and allow the city manager to negotiate for that. If someone else made a similar request, there might be another resolution similar to this that would come down. So I just want to make sure that that was clear to the commission.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, what's your pleasure on this? Commissioner Plord.
I move that we adopt the resolution of intent to sell, which will provide direction for the city manager to begin negotiating a sale of the property, subject to the conditions listed, and bring back the sale to the city commission for final approval.
There's support for that. Support? Commissioner Stonehouse?
I will support.
Okay. Comments?
Thank you, Your Honor. It is important to point out that, again, this only allows the city manager to enter into negotiations, which I, for one, am curious to see what those negotiations would be about. In no way does this say no one else can get involved in this property. I would love to see Mr. Veer's presentation as well. And in my experience, something like this, when it comes to negotiations, is going to last a lot longer than 60 days. I suspect that the city manager won't be coming back to the commission with a recommendation probably for about 3 months or so, maybe longer. Certainly, I trust the city manager in the idea that he's going to explore all possibilities and get the best deal for the city that he possibly can. City manager has shown that he's got that ability and has done it many, many times. So, yeah, very interesting project. Very interesting that two parties or perhaps more, maybe someone who hasn't shown up tonight still wants to get involved. But my own personal feeling about this also is I like the project. I like the idea that development would take place in that particular area, and I like the kind of development that's proposed. So I'm curious to see what the proposals are going to be about and who they're going to come from. And again, I want to point out one more time, this only allows the city manager to negotiate the sale. It does not complete the sale. Whatever the city manager finds has to come back to the city commission. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I certainly agree with everything that Commissioner Plorder said. He really did hit the nail right on the head. This is step one in a very long journey. It's going to take a while to get to the end of that. This is not an exclusive of anything really at this point. But we do live in exciting times, don't we? When we have opportunities like this downtown, we have developers that are, if not competing, at least looking each other in the eye and saying, oh, I want to do that. And the city will always certainly come out, I think, the better for that. So I'm excited about seeing it, and I'm going to be very curious to see what the city manager will come back with in terms of a document for the city commission to look at. But thank you both for having the faith in the city of Marquette that you evidently have had. Not evidently have had, I misstated that you clearly have had by the successful projects that you've brought home. And certainly we look forward to the opportunity for additional ones. Thank you.
Commissioner Reynolds.
2 questions, one for the city attorney, just based on the resolution. So in the resolution, it says, whereas the Verdia Group has submitted a letter of intent, yada, yada, yada. So by signing this resolution, it won't put us just in negotiations with the Verdia Group? That's clearly what is being said?
Right, the letter is in the resolution because that's what triggered this whole business before the commission tonight. The letter triggered the request to buy this parcel. And so that's the basis of the resolution, to authorize the manager to negotiate with the person who has made the request to purchase. But as I said before, I guess if someone else makes a request, maybe there'd be a similar resolution to negotiate with that person down the road. I think the important point is that this is not an exclusive, number one, it's not an exclusive right for 60 days because city manager already rejected those terms administratively. And then secondly, it has to, whatever he does has to come before this commission. Nothing's going to get sold without 5 votes from this commission.
No, I'm aware of that. So if Mr. Veer tomorrow submitted a letter, this could be added to the agenda also as to his?
It could go on the agenda for the next time that Mr. Veer has requested the same, and here's his plan.
Okay,
And please allow the city manager to do that and negotiate with it.
okay. Last question for the city manager. We talked on this briefly, but I thought Mana was gonna be here because I had questions for her. Will she be at the next one? Because like parking questions, future parking.
Yes, she decided not to attend tonight because really the DDA had not totally reviewed this as a group. So we felt it probably safer that she not participate. However, in speaking with her, the proposal, or at least the idea of developing that piece of property fits into the plan, or the plans for the DDA as a whole, and she offered me that opinion. So I also fully intend to involve her in any discussions as we move forward. And yes, a large component of this agreement, if there is an agreement, will be the replacement of the public parking that will be lost.
Okay.
So,
So just when it comes forward, a report from the DDA board would be useful, but other than that, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Campana.
I think we know that both Mr. Veer and Mr. Mahaney have good reputations, and they're, a good track record in their building processes. Either one would do well for the city. First question, and I'm sure this was stated, but they both want that lot right next to Joe's Gym, correct?
correct.
Okay, at this point, Mr. Mahaney has given you a letter of intent.
Correct.
Mr. Veer has not.
Correct.
What happens after 60 days if we accept this letter of intent?
Well, we haven't, as stated by the city attorney, we haven't accepted the exact terms of the letter of intent. I would think that this action just allows me to negotiate the sale, and I would hope to have it done sooner than later. However, if Mr. Veer happens to decide to take action and ask this commission or provide a letter of intent to this commission as well, that could change the dynamics considerably. So, does that answer your question?
Well, I want to know if there's an exclusive period here.
No, that's what I said. There's no exclusive period here. We did not accept those terms of that letter. What we're doing is authorizing the manager to negotiate with Mr. Mahaney, but he doesn't have any exclusivity rights.
Okay. So Mr. Veer could stop in tomorrow and say, here's my letter, and he could be also considered.
It could come before the commission if the manager wants to bring that before you. It could come for consideration.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Anything else? Commissioners? Okay, this is a roll call vote, and it's for the resolution. So clerk will have to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Plurd?
Yes.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Yes.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Campana?
yes.
Mayor Baldini?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, this is the time for our second, wait, another item, yes, okay. This is a request for license to use property. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. Approve a request for license to use city property at 3201 Division Street. Background: No Cayman on Trails Network has submitted a request to amend the grant of license that was approved for the use of the subject property in 2013. Their new application for license of city-owned property includes addition of a 2-room vaulted toilet facility along the northwest edge of the parking area, an updated map of the property with all the current features constructed by the No Cayman on Trails Network, along with the proposed permanent toilet facility, has been provided with the application materials. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation, approve a request for license to use city property at 3201 Division Street and direct the city attorney to prepare a contract for use of the property. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners, your pleasure. Commissioner Campana.
I move that we approve a request for license to use city property at 3201 Division Street and direct the city attorney to prepare a contract for use of the property.
Is there support for this motion? Commissioner Reynolds,
Second.
second. Any comments?
I think the addition of restrooms at this trailhead, which is a very popular trailhead, would be a very good thing for the NTN. They do a good job developing, maintaining, promoting trail use within the city, and we have basically a world-class system here, and this will just add to it. We can't lose. It's a needed item to have. So I would be in favor of this.
Anyone, anything else?
The only thing else, I'm just glad that we continue this partnership with the city and the NTN. I think it's a very valuable one, and I'm glad that we have them.
Any other comments? Mr. Feldhaus.
I would just comment, my thanks, I think the thanks of everybody in Marquette for the great work that you do. This really helps to make this community, this city, a very stellar place. And groups like the No Kamenon, but particularly No Kamenon because of the track record, what you've done, and how you keep doing it better and better and bigger and bigger. It's just a wonderful accolade, so thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing no other comments, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no. It passes 5-0. Thank you. This is our second round of public comment. Anyone wishing to address the commission at this time, please come forward. Limited to 3 minutes. Give us your name and your address and your location that you actually live, city or township. Anyone wishing to speak at this point?
My name is Tom Veer. I am at 139 West Washington. My comments revolve around the signage ordinance and a few things that I think the city might want to be aware of as far as the signage ordinance. I've been cited a couple of times for violation of the signage ordinance, which I disagree with necessarily, and have had discussions with the appropriate city officials to determine what those rules may be, and there is some subjectivity, I believe, in the code itself, the ordinance itself, and I tend to not agree with that. I've been cited for how far away a sign is inside the window, whether it denotes it as signage or not inside of a window, and there's a few other things. Just recently, I was cited for the marquee out in front of the Delph building, and that's why I'm at 139 West Washington. And in that citing, I was cited because I was exceeding the signage requirement for the property that I own. From my understanding, I had that signage grandfathered many years ago here at the City Commission, but unfortunately, the city personnel does not believe that that's the case, and I was requested to pay a $738 fee, I believe, for a variance to the signage ordinance because the sign is too big. There's other things that go on with the signage ordinance that are very difficult for merchants downtown, for merchants everywhere. And I understand signage ordinance, I believe in them heavily, but it's very difficult when a merchant has to spend a lot of money because the property seems to not have the proper signage size for that sign. There's other properties along Washington Street that have front and back signage of areas, that front and back entrances that are not allowed to add up for square footage for the signage size on that property. I think it's important that the city look at this, and I'm going to talk to the Planning Commission also because I believe it's their responsibility to proceed forward with this. I've talked with the city personnel. I think it's important that we come to some consistency with this and understand how it affects the merchants that are putting these signs up and the expense that is required for these signs to run a business. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak at this time?
Frank Shefferdo, 350 East Ridge, Marquette. These are my opinions. For the December 11th item to fill our empty seat, please assure that a cover page and copies of the submitted applications appear in the packets. I'm told the city performs a once-a-year application of herbicide to control clover and broadleaf weeds in parks such as Matson and on our athletic fields. The manufacturer's recommendations are strictly followed. These are the places that we recreate. May the public beware that all such chemicals migrate their ways into Lake Superior. November 13th, all 6 in attendance neglected to address a garbage handling concern. That being the discarding of glass items in green bags that can become safety hazards if they break against each other. It's sad that even items relating to safety, the misbehavior of certain members, and the erosion of our lakeshore fall by the wayside. They just wait for the next storm to take more of our precious parkland. Also on November 13th, Mr. Plord immediately motioned to approve Ms. Compenzi's resignation letter without explanation of why the letter was approved before our public meeting, when it is us who are affected by her early departure. We had a right to read her letter and to prepare effective comments, but not even a cover sheet was provided when there was plenty of time to have provided that information. This is reminiscent of an ADA ramp that was installed on Washington Street years ago, only for it to appear on the agenda after the fact. Probably because the commission realized that a public process was mandated. In my opinion, that's illegal. Technically, the ramp ought to have been removed, then reconstructed after a legal vote. That's the only way they'll learn. By the same token, the Compenzi item ought to have been handled properly or delayed. As was the case with the storm damage item, as added at the meeting time on October 30th, there was ample time to have included this on the agenda in order to fulfill a sufficient public process. November 13th, Mr. Fraser joked around again about the length of our meetings, saying he hoped Ms. Compenzi's meetings in Lansing run shorter. He's often complaining about how long our meetings run, which leads one to ask why he chooses to be here. Although he seems like a nice guy, his main contributions come in the form of humor. A good example was his laughter on October 30th when Mr. Baldini said he may not live to see all the changes. How is that funny? Some humor is fine, but his repeated jokes about the length of our meetings is inappropriate, especially to those of us who spend untold hours in the audience, unpaid and unappreciated for our time. November 30th, Mr. Campana, while addressing 2 independent comments, claimed this board is not a good old boy club. Oh yes, it is. They get in because people vote for recognizable names. And while I usually provide alternatives for my concerns, for this one I have none. Finally, Mr. Plord is asked again to explain his inappropriate reaction to my clearly stated comments. He criticized me, not even knowing what he'd heard.
Are there any other comments from the public?
Jeremy Ottaway, 443 Craig Street. I wanted to take this opportunity to speak about what myself and many others watched at the City Commission meeting 2 weeks ago. First, I wanted to say that hopefully people now realize how difficult your job is. I want to praise you all for doing the right thing in taking applications to fill the City Commission vacancy, as I believe it is the right thing to do, and I believe it is in our community's best interest to do so. I want to remind you and everyone else, citizens in Marquette, that we had an election, and that election was to determine our 3 vacancies from term endings. Those 3 spots were filled by Mr. Fraser, Mr. Stonehouse, and Mayor Baldini. When Ms. Cambenzi's seat became vacant, the city had no knowledge or voting power in this matter. Had the citizens of Marquette been allowed to vote for 4 people as opposed to 3, the results of the entire election from top to bottom could have been much different. This is exactly why it is up to the commission to appoint someone. Additionally, as a resident, I want our commission to choose whoever is best to represent our city. While this is only a 1-year vacancy, it is important to understand there will be some important things for the commission to discuss during the course of the year, such as short-term rental issues, possible Lakeshore Boulevard relocation, and matters of our city's budget. So that makes it even more important for the city to get this right. I would like to read our city's charter, where it outlines vacancies in office, just so everyone understands the City Commission is doing the right thing and taking applications. Section 6.5, subset B reads, vacancies in elective offices shall, within 60 days, be filled for an unexpired term of the officer whose office has become vacant by appointment by a majority vote of the members of the City Commission, then in office of a person possessing the qualifications for the office. It is important to understand that we have trusted our elected officials to make the right choices for us. Per the city's charter, this is one of those choices. I trust the commission will make the right choice, and I applaud them for doing that already and asking for applications for the vacancy. Thank you.
Any other person wishing to address the commission at this time? Anyone else? Seeing no one else, let me bring this portion to a close, and let me call on the commissioners for comments. Commissioner Reynolds, let me start with you.
Well, I didn't have anything this evening, but the only thing that struck interest in me was Mr. Veer's comments with the sign ordinance. I think I've said this 1,000 times now. I'm sick of being jerks and bullies as the city. And so I would really appreciate it if the city manager would look into this for us. And also, if it is something that is going to be looked at with our new, the plan. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but the plan, if the signage is something that is going to be looked into. But I think considering we have a business owner that has decided to rebuild this place that was downtrodden and this kind of thing is happening is a little ridiculous, and stop being jerks. We need to stop being jerks. And that is all.
Well, if I could answer, Mr. Mayor. To answer your first part first, yes, there likely will be some discussion during our code review regarding signage. However, as a matter of background, the downtown sign ordinance was developed in cooperation and at the recommendation of the DDA. I believe it was passed in 2014. This is not a configuration or some type of rules that were established by the city or city commission exclusively. In a nutshell, this was requested by the DDA in large part to continue the, I can't think of the right word, but the cuteness or the quaintness of the downtown area. If you remember, we banned flashing lights, we banned neon signs, we banned certain colors, and as a matter of fact, the commission had to amend the ordinance about a year ago to add green to the allowed yellow. So I beg your pardon, but I don't think we're being jerks. I think we're just enforcing the law that it was we were asked to pass, this commission was asked to approve. My opinion would be that any change in that ordinance should come from the DDA. It was their influence that created it, and if they think it needs to be changed, they should take that direction. I would also point out that 9/10 of the downtown people are just fine with the ordinance. We have an occasional problem with somebody that we do try to resolve. I can let Dennis jump in at any point, but the details of this particular incident are a little bit different from my perspective. As I understand it, the signs came into question when the number of signs exceeded the amount allowed. And it had really nothing, the marquee in front has never been a problem. It was grandfathered in, it's fine. We don't have a problem with the marquee. The only time we have a problem is when you add additional signs beyond what's already there and they're outside the allowed under ordinance. And that's where Mr. Veer was questioned with his sign violations. It would be my assumption, and I can let Dennis fill in the details, but we give everybody opportunities to remove signs before we ticket them. We give them opportunities to comply. If they don't comply, then the tickets are written. Trust me, it's a last resort. So I guess that's, Dennis, if you can add anything.
I don't have anything to add. You covered it.
Thank you. Commissioner Plort.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Verito, an explanation that you've called for. You sent an email to the city stating that you spoke to an attorney about being brought up on a point of order about public comment. Now you state that you weren't speaking about yourself, but you were speaking about another speaker. It's okay. I'll take that explanation, but in the letter was a very thinly veiled threat that you would sue us should we decide to do something like that again. At least that's how it was worded. I don't believe you mean to threaten us. I really don't. But if you feel like you want to sue the commission, please put my name first. I'll be happy to tell you how to spell it. Beyond that, your grasp of even the obvious is very problematic for you. That's become clear to me. For example, tonight you state that we bypassed an issue about solid waste management with glass. If you go back to watch the film, I'm sure you know how to do that. You'll see there was a lengthy discussion about that, and we also had a vote. So again, your grasp of the obvious is very, very lacking. However, I do want to thank you about one thing. Thank you for stating publicly in the last meeting that basically what you're doing is attacking us during public comment. We all know that. Everybody that watches knows that. I'm just glad to know that you know that. That's really why you come up to public comment. For example, tonight, you essentially gave us nothing we can use, pretty much like you normally do. However, you stayed within the rules, and you can speak to public comment as much as you like, including the kindergarten mimifications that you've done in this meeting and last meeting. If you want to do that, you can do that. I will concede that those are your opinions. Beyond that, I want to thank Mr. Vera for bringing up the signage issue, but I also want to thank you for bringing up the idea that you're interested in further development in the city. Like that idea, as I mentioned, and please again understand that as you mentioned, Mr. Matheny is also very good at developing. We recognize that. I do want to see what the city manager has to find out from Mr. Matheny. But if you have a plan and you wish to submit it, I'd love to see you do that, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that particular property or any other property. Because as was mentioned, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Campana mentioned that you've done some great work in the past, and we do recognize that, and I want you to know that. And so please don't be discouraged with our vote tonight. It is in no way a reflection on what you want to do or what you may want to do in the future. Also, again, Mayor Baldini mentioned earlier in the announcement, I just want to reiterate, there's a parade on Friday with the lighting of the Christmas tree. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think this year is going to be a little warmer than it was last year. Not that that makes a lot of difference, but it is a little nicer. And so I urge people to come out. And I think pretty much all of us, I know last year all of us on the city commission were there, and a lot of members of City Hall were there. So if you want to stop by and say hello, introduce yourself and whatever, I'd love to meet you. And feel free to say, give any comments that you have as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Stones. Well, just a couple of quick items, if I can, that really we should reflect on a little bit. The potential of more development downtown and good quality development from two great quality developers. That really is exciting. When you think about that, that is really exciting because you've seen what both of them can do. And now here's an opportunity for somebody to do it again. It's also exciting to see the level of interest in applying for the position of city commissioner. When you put that in perspective of there's communities around, there's cities around where they can't get people to serve at any cost. They literally have vacant seats that cannot be filled. And we have competition here for people to fill this seat, knowing that this is a difficult job, a demanding job. I mean, the average commissioner, I think, puts in at least a couple days a week of time just trying to keep up with all of the knowledge, all of the activity, all of the things that you have to be doing. So it by no means is a remunerative position, but to see that level of interest is really very heartening. I have nothing further, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Veer's problem with signs, I will say that I side with him. We do have ordinances, and when the city cites someone, they do it because the ordinance says they have to do it. So what we have to do if we're going to make it better is change that ordinance. So I mean, the city's doing what they have to do, but I personally don't think that the sign ordinances are good as the way they are. The Honorable Mayor and myself are on a committee right now that's looking at land land development use codes, and we're hoping to address the sign ordinance. I think what you say, you have merit in, you know, what you are describing as far as how much signage we should have. I would be in favor of, and it'll be controlled. So we're going to try to work with you, and hopefully we'll get a solution to this. You know, the city's not wrong, you're not wrong, and hopefully we can make it work. Yes, as far as the, you know, we're fortunate to have two developments wanting to happen. Both of them are good developers. We're sitting here, we're going to benefit from this. We hope it works out well, and we will see where it goes. And, you know, there's people that just for years have been criticizing and complaining at these meetings. A good way to get over that would be to maybe file an application to be on the commission seat. If he really wants to make you know, improve the situation here in the city, I'd like to see him turn in an application. Thank you.
Thank you. It is an exciting time in the city. We're never going to build a big box store downtown Marquette. We're going to have to really look at what's the downtown going to look at in 5 or 10 years. And this sort of development will bring more people downtown, more attractions, or whatever that's going to be. But it will. It'll bring people downtown, they'll shop in the stores, eat in the restaurants, and do things of that nature. So I think it is exciting, and I'm quite sure we will get something back at some point. It's good for us and good for the community. As Mayor Pro Tem Campana mentioned, he and I are serving on the Land Development Code. It's our purgatory on earth. But the meetings are long, they're very detailed for a reason. But the other night, we did talk about signage, and we talked about trees. And something has to be done. I as a commissioner for 3 years, the most complaints I get as a commissioner, and I don't know if my colleagues would agree with this or not, are the rules and regulations of the city. And nobody's proposing that we just get rid of all of them. They're proposing that some judgment be used, and that we are a changing community. And we talked the other night, we discussed the other night the fact that the current rules and procedures for signage were done 5 years ago or 6 years ago. This community has changed significantly in those 5 years. And so we may have to revisit it. I think we should ask the DDA, but it is finally our decision, the Planning Commission, and then back to us. So I think we have to look at that. So we are reviewing the ordinances, and it is an interesting time. Every place we go as commissioners, to other meetings, people talk about, what are you people doing in Marquette? Well, we have individuals who are willing to invest, and I also think we have a commission that's willing to be flexible, to create an atmosphere for the investment and to be helpful if we can to make some of that happen. So just as a reminder, this Thursday at the end of the business day is applications have to be in for the commission. Christmas parade is on Friday, and hope to see you all there. And you're right, I think Commissioner Plord, the weather is supposed to be better than last year. Last year was very cold. So let me turn it over to the city manager for any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There'll be one more meeting before, but my office hours this month are on the 13th, Wednesday the 13th at 10 a.m., Peter White Public Library. But we do have a meeting on the 11th. However, I'm not sure I'll get a chance to talk that night, so I thought I'd throw it out there tonight. Just following up on your comments at the beginning of the meeting, for the public's benefit, community development is now moved to the service center on Wright Street. If you need permits or anything of that nature, you need to go to that location to get them. In the interim, while we're remodeling the second floor of City Hall, our part of our finance department has gone to the water plant. However, they are usually the people that you don't need to meet in person, so there should be no reason to have to visit there, but they will answer the call if you do call. Some of our assessing people that used to be in community development are now in the finance department. I don't expect you to follow this, but I just want it out there that I covered it, so, people can not accuse me of not telling him. And the clerk's office is in 103 downstairs. This is all temporary, probably for at least 6 months while we do the renovation, which is starting as we speak. There's already some preliminary work done, but it'll be getting under steam here in a few short days. And lastly, for the commission's benefit, the project that was approved at the Carp River is in progress as we speak, with work being done today. So, thank you.
We're adjourned.